To a special look east, where we ask, how do we stop the stabbings? As police launch a week of action on knife crime, we hear the story of a mum whose son was killed by total strangers. Luton Town Football Club is backing her campaign. We hear from the surgeons who are trying to save these young lives, and we ask whether ultimately a change in the law is what's needed. We are in Luton tonight, where back in September, 16-year-old Ashraf Habimana lost his life on the street outside his friend's house. He was one of 5 people to be stabbed in just that day here in Luton. He died, another teenager was left fighting for his life. And it is attacks like those which police right across the country are focusing on this week as they try to raise awareness of knife crime. Now, here in Bedfordshire, police know that on average, around 18 or 19 people under the age of 25 are involved in knife crime every single month at the moment. And those are just the recorded figures. They take into account anyone who possesses a bladed weapon as well as those who use them. Now, of course, knife crime happens right across the country. But here in Bedfordshire, that 16-year-old, also a 19-year-old and a 25-year-old are among those who've lost their lives from stab wounds since April this year. Tonight we'll hear from the hospital trauma team who do their best to save the many, many more who've been injured. Some of them have needed counselling because of what they've seen of late. We will start, though, with the story of Azaan Kaleem. He was killed 5 years ago by people he'd never met. Now, his story has been turned into a film which police hope will help to educate young people about the realities and the dangers of carrying a weapon. It's being backed by Luton Town Football Club, as Nicola Hazler reports.
Police emergency.
Yeah, my boyfriend's been stabbed.
Okay, whereabouts is this?
On Hartsfield Road.
Okay.
Shannon witnessed all of it. She was 17 years old.
There is so many other people that this sort of incident affects.
Azaan, known as AJ, was 18 years old when he started carrying a knife to protect himself.
His granddad died, and his granddad was the male role model in his life. And he got a little bit difficult at home. I think he was crying out for help. A 28-year-old male ended up attacking my son, and it was a brutal attack. And AJ changed after that. He was actually scared to go out in Luton. Shannon told me that if he did go out, he carried a knife.
He showed me the knife, actually, and I strongly told him that is going to get you in trouble. He agreed, just like, Darren, yeah, I know, you're right, I know you're right, but I don't feel safe without it.
Roseanne said goodbye to him at 8:30 one morning. She had no idea he had a knife.
I received a phone call from Shannon, screaming hysterically down the phone that AJ had been stabbed.
Okay, what's your boyfriend's name, please?
Azaan Kaleem. We need someone to hurry up.
Yeah, we got him on the way to you, my love. Stay on the phone with me.
I'm screaming in the car, and I see the blue lights go past.
Azaan had felt threatened by another boy and showed him he had a knife. But that boy was part of a gang.
They got out of the car, walked up and proceeded to punch him and stab him.
The film about AJ's death is to be shown to school children and college students across Bedfordshire.
I felt emotional after it, but I think it's really good just to, try help young people not to use knives.
Family friend of mine, he was just going to a game, he just turned 20, and he happened to look up and looked at the wrong person, and 2 boys came over and stabbed him. He was doing really well in life, and it got taken away from him in not even 5 seconds, so.
It's a campaign that's supported by Luton Football Club.
I think footballers have got a massive position with it, being role models to these type of people. Some of them have grown up in wrong neighbourhoods or have had friends that have maybe pulled them into the wrong direction. They might find another passion in football, and we can definitely play a big part in that.
Roseanne wants the Just Drop It campaign to highlight the ripple effects of knife crime. Her powerful message, she says, will mean her son didn't die in vain.
Carrying a weapon won't keep you safe. it will end in a really bad way. Either you will take somebody's life or somebody will take yours, and there are no winners. Your family will lose, their family will lose, and it just ruins lives. Thank you.
Nicola Hazler, BBC Look East, Luton.
Well, that film will be launched here at Youthscape in Luton tonight. But like most knife crime victims in Bedfordshire, Azaan Kaleem was taken to the Luton and Dunstable Hospital. David Kirby was one of the consultants who tried to save him that night. It is an experience that surgeon has never forgotten. He's been telling me about the impact of knife crime on him and his trauma team, about the fact that sometimes they do fear for their own safety, that sometimes people are simply carried in injured off the street, and for issues of confidentiality, that can't be reported to the police. He said the recent levels of violence have left his team feeling anxious and on edge. Some of what you're about to hear, it is graphic, but they see the very worst of knife crime, and this is the reality of it for them.
They're almost inevitably young people, and we're all of a generation where we've got children of our own. You look at the patient in front of you and think, that could be my own child. And a number of staff over recent months have required extra support and counselling, which is quite a thing to say, really, if you're talking about hardened staff like us who are being affected by that kind of level of injury. We're always thinking at the back of our minds, well, we've had several today, are we going to get another several in retribution tomorrow? It does set you on edge, and it's very stressful in the background all the time.
Many of the casualties that you have in here, they do survive, thanks to you and your team. Not all of them do. You must have to turn around and say to parents at some point that their child is not going to come home.
Indeed. So when you put that much effort in, and despite your best efforts, you still see somebody die, personally, that's a really, really difficult thing to take. And then, once you've done that, going and telling the mum, the dad, the sister, the boyfriend, the younger brothers and sisters that their loved one is not coming home, you just know that their world has completely turned upside down, and it'll never be the same again.
5 years ago, that was the situation that you were in with Azaan Kaleem,
AJ, yeah.
18 years old. He came in here and you literally held his heart in your hands. And in the end, no one could save him. That stuck with you.
Yeah, AJ came in, I think it was a Thursday evening, actually, in March 2018, and we knew he was coming in. We got a pre-alert, and there was a hole in his heart that we managed to stitch, and yes, I was helping and holding his heart, and in fact, at one point I had my finger in the hole because the heart was beating, but my finger was stopping the blood from coming out of it. And he survived that night, and he survived the following 2 days. But then after that, it became apparent that his brain had died, and so his life support was turned off. And so I had that conversation with his mum and his girlfriend at the time. I had that conversation with them. I went home and I didn't sleep for the rest of that night, and that particularly affected me. And I think that was one of the early cases that led me down a route of becoming much more involved with violence reduction, to try and see if there was something else we could do to stop these kids from coming to us.
And David, do you think that there is something that you can do? Because you've been going into schools, sharing stories like the one you just shared with us. If stories like that don't get through to these teenagers, do you think there is anything that can?
You've got to think positive. You've got to think, yes, there is, because if you don't think that, then we might as well all give up and go home. So, yes, there is something that we can do. I'm sure there is. And I think part of this is going to be asking these young people, look, what is it that you need from us? But here's what I see. Look, if there's an altercation on the street, if there's a fight and someone gets stabbed, then one person's going to end up here and the other person is going to end up in bracelets in a police cell. It's as simple as that. There are going to be 2 lives ruined. There are going to be 2 families who have been destroyed by what happened that evening. It's not a badge of honour. It really isn't. And, you know, you hear lots of stories about rumours it doesn't hurt to get stabbed, or you don't feel it when you've been stabbed. You do. You ask someone who's been stabbed, does it hurt? It does. And if it doesn't, why do they come in here screaming for morphine? Of course they do. Of course it hurts. And if that doesn't hurt, the interventions, the bits I need to do to you to stop you from dying, they certainly hurt. So it's about getting across to young people the consequence of what they do. You're here, you're in a body bag, you're in a police cell, and none of that is particularly pleasant. It's all very, very painful.
Do you worry for your own safety and the safety of your staff? Because if someone is coming in and they've been stabbed, you know, there's been a weapon involved. Do you worry about that?
If I say to you that was one of the first things on our minds, we know from statistics you're more likely to get stabbed with your own knife than someone else's. So it is not unreasonable to assume that the person in front of you who has been stabbed has at least at some point been carrying a knife themselves. A lot of the times that the police will have been on scene and performed a search before they're in the ambulance, and the police officer will have accompanied them in, and at that point we can take it as a given that they have been searched, but I'll still ask the question, has this person been searched for weapons? And if the answer is no, unless they're unconscious and can't stab me, they need to be searched before I see them.
And of course, not everyone reports it to the police, do they? Sometimes you will get people who just walk in carrying someone off the street.
That's correct.
So, in a way, you see more of this than the police do.
There has always been a difference, a discrepancy between the amount of violent crime, or the amount of crime in general, and that which the police can record, because they don't know about it all. It's not all reported. And likewise, if someone's injured and they come to us, then for reasons of confidentiality and the public confidence in the medical profession, we don't always tell the police about every injured person we see who has been stabbed. There are some exceptions, clearly, especially if there's a threat to life. But if we started telling, you know, authorities in general, the police, every time someone comes up to us with injuries sustained in a violent assault, people wouldn't come to us. And that's the last thing we want. We are here to treat the injured and the sick. If we do something that prevents them from coming to us, what are we doing?
Did you ever think that you would see this kind of volume of knife crime in such young people?
When I started training and decided I wanted to work in A&E and be an emergency physician, I wasn't naive to the fact that a lot of our work is from violent assault. But the wanton and flagrant disregard for human life and the use of knives by which to achieve that, I don't think I was prepared for that. You have some shifts where it's absolutely awful, and you go home and think, oh, yeah, that has got to be it. Someone has got to do something about this. Well, that's someone. Hey, that's us. That's me. That's the authorities that are helping put together this package and just drop it.
David Kirby talking to me there from the Luton and Dunstable Hospital. If you've been affected by anything that you've just heard, please do visit our Action Line website for support. Lots of organisations on there who can help you. What we haven't got across yet is the fact that these patients have to be searched when they come into A&E before they can be treated, and that often means that the whole A&E department has to be locked down. This is something that affects all patients in the hospital at that particular time. The hospital has now got funding to have crisis workers based in the hospital who can take these young victims when they come in and show them towards a different life, perhaps a safer life. It's something that's in operation in hospitals in London and also Birmingham, and it's happening with some success. But do we need more than that? Do we perhaps need a change in the law? Do we need to change the way that knives, for instance, are sold and stored?
For me, this is really about getting the right moment, the best moments to engage with often young people who are involved in dangerous activities, which has in some cases led to them being a victim of a stabbing injury. And getting them at that moment of crisis sometimes is the best time to focus attention and get them on that road to diversion and changing their lives around.
We know that similar projects are up and running in London, in Leeds, in Birmingham. They are having success, so we hope that it will do the same thing here. But everyone seems to be doing their best. The surgeons are doing their best. Community groups are doing their best. I've got to ask you, is that enough? Is it time for a change in the law? There are community activists who say it is. We need to ban the sale of knives online in the UK so that we know who's getting them. Is that something that you would support? The
government's already changed some legislation to actually ban some weapons that which you ordinarily would be able to get online in the past. But the reality is this: what many people don't really appreciate is that the vast majority of the knives being used in the stabbings that we're seeing in our communities, just the ordinary kitchen knives. Okay, so even if you ban some of those dangerous zombie knives which have been banned, the ordinary knife that you use for slicing your bread are sometimes those, or often actually, that what many of these young people are using in these heinous crimes.
So do we go further? Do we ban the sale of all knives online in the UK? So you physically have to go into a store to buy one. Do we have to lock up knives in homes? Is that where we need to go? Is it possible or practical?
You could consider that, but what does that actually solve? In the sense that someone could still go and buy a knife in person rather than buying it online. Okay, a young man goes into the kitchen, grabs a knife, puts it down their pocket. You know, so banning it online, I can see why that could be an attractive policy suggestion. I'm not sure if it entirely solves the problem, because most of the knives being used by a lot of these young people, as far as I'm aware, are the ordinary kitchen knives that can be picked up in any kitchen in the home.
That is certainly what we see. I would like to bring in our political correspondent, Ben Schofield, here. Ben, you've been looking at what some of the other parties are saying about policy around knife crime. Is anyone saying anything different?
Well, I should mention first off that in the King's speech last week, the government didn't have the monarch say anything about knife crime or knives specifically. They did say that the government would act to keep communities safe from crime. There had also been a consultation over the summer about introducing new pieces of legislation to ban certain types of knife and increase police powers around knives. I've spoken to Rachel Hopkins, who is one of the MPs in Luton, one of the Labour MPs in Luton, and she says that, and she would say this, wouldn't she, but the government response to knife crime is, in their words, wholly inadequate. They say a Labour government would make its mission to halve knife crime within 10 years. How would they do that? Well, one of the pieces of legislation that they would bring forward would act to ban the sale of dangerous knives in online marketplaces, and they would do something akin to the public health approach that we've seen in other areas, notably Scotland, which has had some success. And that would be something like a £100 million a year community youth hub network that would be set up to identify young people who are at risk of falling into knife crime. As well as other measures, and I'm sure Festus would have some sympathy with that. You've through your violence and exploitation reduction unit, you've been out and tried to tackle this as a public health issue. And you're right that everyone seems to be doing their best, but this is one of those intractable problems of our age. Labour say that knife crime has gone up by 70% in the past 8 years, since 2015. It is an enormous issue that is really wreaking havoc in our communities.
And it's not one, obviously, that we can solve right now. Festus Akinbusoy, the Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner for Bedfordshire, thank you very much indeed. Ben, thanks to you also. We do know that no scheme to tackle knife crime is absolutely perfect, but people here in Bedfordshire, right across the country, they are doing their best to bring these levels down. We know that there is still a mountain to climb, though. If knife crime is something that has affected you, you can always get in touch with us and share your story. For now, though, thank you to my guests, and thank you to you for watching. Good night.